Jake sat alone in the corner of the cold metal cafeteria. The space station floated quietly above a forgotten moon. Far from Earth, and even farther from comfort, it was one of those silent nights where the stars looked like they were whispering secrets to each other. Jake's food tray was small, just a square block of protein and a warm cup of something that smelled like soup. It wasn't much, but it was all he had for the night. Maybe even for the next 2 days, he sighed. Lifting the block with a dull fork, as he brought it to his mouth, he heard soft footsteps. He looked up slowly. An alien woman stood in front of him. Her skin shimmered like deep silver with lines of glowing blue running across her arms. In her arms, she held a small child, no older than 5. The child's eyes looked tired, sunken, and his tiny hands clutched his mother's robe like he was holding on to life itself. Jake didn't speak. The alien mother didn't speak either. She simply sat down at the far edge of his table, her head bowed low. She hadn't come to talk. She had come to sit, to rest, maybe to disappear for a while. Jake glanced around the cafeteria. No one else was in the room. No guards, no officers, no medics. Just him and this silent pair. He looked at his tray again. He wasn't full. He wasn't strong. But something in his heart moved, something heavy, something human. He slowly slid his food tray across the table toward the alien mother. She raised her head a little, surprised. Her glowing eyes met his for a moment. Then she looked down at her child and back at the food. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say thank you. She just broke a small piece from the block and gently pressed it into the child's hand. The child opened his mouth slowly and began to eat. One small bite at a time, Jake sat back, his stomach twisting with hunger. But for some reason, the sight of that child eating made it a little easier, a little warmer. Minutes passed in silence. Then, without a word, the alien mother stood up. She looked at Jake again, her face calm, her eyes soft, and then she placed something small on the table beside him, a stone. Smooth and green, with strange writing on it, before Jake could ask anything. She turned and walked away with the child in her arms. Jake picked up the stone. It was warm, almost alive. He felt a pulse from it, soft like a heartbeat. Strange, he thought, but maybe it was just his imagination. He slipped it into his jacket and stood up to return to his bunk. As he walked through the empty halls of the station, something felt different. It was like the air itself had changed, like something had noticed his small act and marked it. Back in his room, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the mother and the child. Why? Were they here? Why did they look so scared? Was she just another refugee from the collapsed worlds in Zone Delta? Or was there something more? Jake had seen many aliens during his time on the station. Traitors, diplomats, refugees, and criminals. But this one felt different. Her silence wasn't just fear, was heavy, like she was hiding something far bigger. He opened his locker and looked at the stone again, still warm, still glowing faintly. He stared at it for a long time, then placed it under his pillow and lay down. Just before sleep took him, he felt a tiny hum under his head. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, like the stone was singing in a language older than stars. Jake didn't understand it, but somehow, deep in his heart, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. Jake woke up in the middle of the night. The room was quiet, the lights were dim, and the air felt heavier than usual. He turned his head slowly and sat up in bed. His first thought was about the strange green stone the alien mother had left him. He reached under the pillow, and his fingers touched it. It was glowing, softly, like it was breathing. But then he noticed something even stranger. There was a faint light coming from his arm. He pulled up the sleeve of his shirt. A thin line of glowing blue symbols had appeared on his skin, stretching from his wrist to his elbow, the same color as the alien mother's markings. Jake blinked and rubbed his arm. The symbols didn't fade, didn't hurt, and didn't feel hot. They were just there, quiet and calm, like they belonged. He had never seen anything like it before, not even during his training in advanced alien cultures. He stood up and walked toward the small mirror in the corner of his room. As he looked at himself, the markings started to pulse, slow and steady. Like a heartbeat, he felt strange, but not scared. More like connected. Then he saw something else. On his table, beside his datapad, there was a fruit. It was round, orange in color, with soft glowing lines across the skin. Jake walked over slowly. He hadn't brought any fruit to his room, and nothing like this was served in the cafeteria. He picked it up and felt its warmth. It was alive in a way, fresh, natural, but different. It was an alien fruit, no doubt. How did it get there? The door hadn't opened during the night, and no one had entered. He would have heard. He stared at the fruit, and then back at the glowing stone. Then at the strange markings on his arm. Everything pointed to one answer. The alien mother had returned, and she had left him a gift. Jake didn't eat the fruit. He placed it carefully in a small sealed box and activated his datapad. He tried to report the situation to the command center, but the communication line gave him only static. Every attempt to upload the image of the markings or record a video ended in a system crash. It was like something or someone did not want this event to be shared. Jake felt alone in that moment. But not alone in a bad way, more like he was chosen for something special, something hidden. He had helped the alien mother, and now she had given him something in return. Later that morning, Jake walked through the station halls. Everyone moved as usual, busy, tired, and disconnected. No one noticed the faint glow on his arm, hidden under his sleeve. No one noticed the strange calm in his face. Then, near the station garden dome, he saw her again. The alien mother stood there, watching a patch of growing plants. The child was sleeping on her shoulder. Jake approached slowly, unsure what to say. She turned before he could speak. Her eyes met his, and she smiled a soft, sad smile. She gently reached out and touched his hand, without speaking. She placed a small crystal into his palm. The moment he touched it, the markings on his arm glowed brighter. The crystal hummed softly. He felt a message enter his mind, not in words, but in emotion, trust, connection, memory, and danger. She looked into his eyes and said just one word in her own language. Jake didn't understand it, but his heart did. She nodded once and walked away with her child. Disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, Jake held the crystal tight. In his hand, his skin still warm, his heart still racing. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew this was not just about kindness anymore. This was deeper, older. The crystal had linked him to something he couldn't explain. That night, he dreamt of stars falling into water, of ancient machines rising from broken worlds, and of a voice calling out to him from far beyond space. The voice wasn't human, but it was gentle. It asked for help, for protection. Jake woke up sweating, the crystal still in his hand. The gift was not just a thank you, it was a door. And now, it was open. The next morning, Jake walked through the lower deck of the station. His arm still glowed beneath his sleeve, and the crystal in his pocket hummed with a quiet rhythm. He didn't feel sick or weak. But something inside him felt different. His senses were sharper, his steps lighter, and his thoughts deeper. Every shadow he passed made him pause for a second longer. Every sound in the hallway seemed louder. The world around him was changing. Or maybe he was the one changing. He passed the docking bay and noticed something odd. A ship had arrived during the night. It was parked in silence, darker in color than any he had seen before. There were no markings, no flags, and no lights on. 3 figures in long cloaks stepped off the ramp slowly. They didn't walk like soldiers or traders, they glided. Smooth, slow, like ghosts wearing skin. Jake stepped behind a crate and watched them. His heart raced. Something about them felt wrong, deeply wrong. Even without seeing their faces, he could feel the cold coming off them, like they carried a storm inside their cloaks. He wanted to report it, but the come line on his wrist device blinked red, signal blocked. Again. He turned back and headed toward the hydroponic dome where he had seen the alien mother before. As he approached, he saw her again, Lyra. The silver-skinned mother with the glowing eyes. She was sitting on a bench, her child asleep in her lap. But this time, she looked directly at Jake before he could even speak. "I warned you," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. "You shared food, a sacred act in my culture. And now the bond is made." Jake sat down beside her, confused. "Bond?" he asked. "What bond?" Lyra looked at her child and then back at Jake. "In our world, when someone gives food to a starving child with no demand, no price, no fear, they are chosen. The old code marks the one who gives with the light of the ancients. That mark is on your arm now." Jake looked down at his glowing skin. "What does it mean?" he asked. Lyra sighed. "It means you are now part of a path we cannot control. It means the void collectors will come for you." Jake frowned. "I saw strangers arriving today," he said. "Dark cloaks, no faces, no sound. Lyra's?" Eyes widened. "They're already here," she whispered. "You need to hide the crystal. Do not let them see it. Do not speak of it." Jake reached into his pocket and felt the humming gem. "But why? What is it?" She shook her head. "It is not a thing," she replied. "It is a living memory, a key to a place long forgotten. They have been searching for it for years, killing for it, burning whole planets, and now it is in your hand." Jake stood up, fear creeping into his chest. "So what do I do?" he asked. Lyra stood too, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "You do nothing loud, nothing brave. You survive." Suddenly, a voice rang out across the dome. It was Commander Raliktal, broad, human, and full of suspicion. "Soldier." "Jake," he called, "step away from the alien." Now, Jake froze. He turned slowly. Seeing station security behind the commander, the moment felt heavy, like a trap waiting to close. Lyra whispered fast in a language Jake didn't know. Then she slipped the child onto her back and vanished into the garden mist. Jake stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "Yes, Commander?" he asked. "What are you doing down here alone?" Ralik asked. "Who were you speaking to?" "Just checking the plant, sir," Jake replied. "Needed some quiet." Ralik didn't believe him. His eyes narrowed, looking Jake up and down. "You've been acting strange lately," he said. "If you're hiding something, we'll find it." Jake gave a slow nod and walked away, but inside he was boiling with fear and confusion. He knew the warning was real. The void collectors were here. The commander was watching him, and Lyra was on the run again that night. Jake sat alone in his dark room. He held the crystal tightly and looked at his arm. The symbols glowed brighter. Now, pulsing like a quiet drum, he whispered to himself, "I only gave away a meal, but now I'm in the middle of a war I don't understand." And far away in the shadows of the station, 3 cloaked figures stood watching his door, waiting. The power flickered across the station's outer rings. Lights blinked for a second, and all sound paused like the station had stopped breathing. Jake was walking back from the engineering bay when it happened. His instincts kicked in, and he ducked into the shadows of a service tunnel. He knew something was wrong. This wasn't a technical failure, was a message. A signal. His wrist device buzzed once, then went dead. The network was cut again. But not by accident. He looked through a small window into the docking bay. The strange cloaked ship still rested there. The 3 figures from before had multiplied now. There were 6, all dressed in dark robes. They moved in perfect silence, scanning the station halls with strange floating orbs that pulsed red with each sweep. Jake felt a chill crawl up his back. They weren't just searching. They were hunting. He had to move fast. Jake rushed through the maintenance tunnels, trying to stay off the main paths. His boots tapped lightly on the metal, his breath short and controlled every few meters. He stopped and listened one wrong. Turn one sound too loud, and they'd find him. He didn't know where Lyra and her child were hiding, but he knew one place they might go: the waste recycler bay. No one went there unless they had to. It stank of chemicals, metal, dust, and old machine grease. When he reached the lower decks, he pressed himself against the walls and slipped into the recycler entrance. The smell hit him instantly, thick and sour. He moved carefully, scanning each row of broken parts and scrap bins. Then he saw her. Lyra was crouched behind a crate, holding her child close to her chest. Her eyes met Jake's, and for a moment, she looked ready to run again. But Jake raised his hand slowly, showing her it was safe. "I found you," he whispered. "They're here," she nodded. "I know," she replied. They already passed this area once, but they didn't search deep. Jake looked at the small vent near the floor. "We can hide in there," he said. "It leads to the coolant storage. It's cold, but they won't scan it. Too many thermal signals." Lyra hesitated, but the child stirred in her arms and coughed softly. She nodded, and together they crawled through the narrow vent. The metal walls were tight, barely enough for Jake to move, but they pushed through, inch by inch, behind them. Heavy footsteps echoed into the recycler bay. The cloaked figures had returned. Jake paused and looked through the vent screen. One of the cloaked hunters stopped right in front of the crate Lyra had been hiding behind. It bent down its mask. Hissing softly, it sniffed the air like an animal. Then it stood up again and walked away. Jake exhaled slowly and moved forward. They reached the coolant room at last. Cold mist swirling around old broken pipes and storage tanks. He helped Lyra and the child into the shadows between the tanks. Lyra looked at him, her voice quiet but firm. "You don't have to stay there after me. Not you." Jake shook his head. "I gave you food," he said. "That means something to you. And now it means something to me." Lyra touched her forehead to his hand. "It is not just tradition, Jake," she whispered. "In my world, giving food in a time of hunger is a vow, means you will protect, no matter the cost." Jake felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Suddenly, the crystal in his pocket began to glow again. A bright light pulsed from it, and the markings on his arm flashed to life. Lyra's eyes widened. "They've locked on to your signal," she said. "They're tracking you now." Jake cursed under his breath and reached into his jacket. He pulled the crystal out, its glow like fire in the cold room. He looked around and spotted an old shield generator lying in a corner. He opened the hatch and placed the crystal inside, then slammed the hatch shut and activated the core. The generator buzzed, its shield forming a dampening field. The crystal's light vanished, and the markings on Jake's arm faded instantly. Lyra gasped. "You hit its light," she said. "You broke the path." "No," Jake replied. "I just bought us time." A loud alarm sounded through the station. Someone had triggered a breach lockdown. The entire level was going into security mode. Doors began to seal, and lights turned red. Jake looked at Lyra and the child. "We need to move again," he said. "They'll seal this section next." And so, once again, the chase began. But now, Jake wasn't just hiding. He was protecting. The red lights flashed across the ceiling as steel doors began to close one by one. Jake grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her forward. The child clung to her back, silent but alert. Each second was precious. Each step dangerous. They ran through an old maintenance tunnel. The floor shook under their feet as the station locked down section by section. From the corner of his eye, Jake saw the shadow of a cloaked hunter moving toward them from the opposite end. He stopped suddenly and looked back at Lyra. "You keep going," he said, breathless. "There's a supply hatch ahead. Crawl through. It leads to the communication relay." Lyra shook her head. "No, not without you." Jake grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "I need to distract them," he said. "If they catch you and the crystal, it's over." Lyra stared into his eyes, something glowing behind her tears. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. She could feel his heart, steady and stubborn. She nodded once and kissed his forehead. Then she turned and ran. Disappearing into the shadows with her child, Jake took a deep breath and pulled out a glowing decoy crystal he had made the night before. It wasn't as strong as the real one, but it carried the same energy pulse. He activated it and threw it down the corridor. The pulse echoed like thunder, and the hunters turned sharply, racing toward him. Jake ran in the opposite direction. Leading them into the abandoned reactor core, he slid through the narrow passage and locked the gate behind him. He was alone now. With 6 cloaked figures closing in fast, he moved fast through the broken platform. Jumping over cables and twisted metal, his boots scraped against the floor, every sound bouncing through the dark chamber. He climbed up a rusted ladder and reached the central control panel. He had one chance, one plan. Jake reprogrammed the emergency coolant dump system. If triggered at the right moment, the chamber would flood with freezing mist, hiding his escape path and blocking the hunters, but he had to be close enough too. Pull the lever manually. The remote systems were dead. He looked around, sweat rolling down his face. His heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. Then he saw them, entering the chamber below. Moving like shadows with glowing eyes, they sniffed the air again, their senses locked onto the crystal signal in his pocket. Jake waited until the last one stepped into position. Then he pulled the lever. A loud hiss filled the air as white mist burst from every pipe. The entire chamber turned into a blizzard of cold smoke. The cloaked hunters screamed, their vision blinded. Jake jumped from the platform, landing hard behind a broken pipe. He crawled through a small hatch and out into the vent system. His body shaking, he was bleeding now. A piece of metal had cut his leg during the fall. But he didn't stop. He pulled himself forward, inch by inch, until he was far enough from the mist. Then everything went dark when Jake opened his eyes. He was lying on a soft surface. The light was golden, warm, gentle. Strange music echoed in the background, light and distant, like singing stars. He tried to sit up, but couldn't. His body felt weightless. Above him, a glowing blue ceiling sparkled like a galaxy. He was not on the station anymore. Lyra appeared beside him, her eyes wide and wet with emotion. "You came back," she said softly. "We found you after the mist cleared. Your body was almost frozen." Jake blinked slowly. "How?" he whispered. "You marked yourself with the sacred bond," she replied, "and the crystal accepted you." She raised her hand and pressed it to his chest. A bright light formed above his heart. It pulsed gently, showing a glowing pattern different from before, not just the lines of the ancients, but something new, something human. "Our elders used healing light to save you," she said, but during the process, the crystal revealed more. Jake looked at her, confused. "More?" Lyra nodded. "You carry something inside you, old and powerful, something that only a few can awaken." Jake closed his eyes and felt the warmth inside him. It was like a second heart, strong, steady, and filled with purpose. He had sacrificed his safety, his body, and his freedom, but in return, he had become something more. Not just a protector, not just a soldier, but a symbol, and far away, beyond the stars, others had begun to notice. Jake stood under the glowing blue sky. His feet touched soft glass-like stone that shimmered in every color of the rainbow. He was no longer on the space station, no longer surrounded by metal or fear. This place felt ancient, alive, and full of whispers he couldn't hear clearly. The sky above him swirled like moving galaxies. Strange trees grew upside down, floating above the ground while their roots hung in the air. He looked around, confused but calm. It was peaceful, but he knew it wasn't a dream. This place was real, somewhere hidden deep in the universe. Then he saw them figures walking toward him slowly, tall and glowing, with long robes made of light. Their faces were not fully clear, like shining masks of mist and energy. They stopped a few feet in front of him, surrounding him in a quiet circle. "You are awake now," one of them said. Jake took a step back. "Where am I?" he asked. "You stand in the chamber of memory," another replied, "a place where truth is shown, not told." The crystal that once rested in his pocket now floated in the air above his heart. It spun slowly, glowing brighter with each word. "Spoken, you think you were just kind?" the voice said. "You think you gave food and made a simple choice. But that choice opened the seal." Jake didn't understand. "What seal?" he asked. "Long ago," the figure continued, "humans lived among the stars. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, but they were the most compassionate, the most willing to protect others. Their kindness connected the galaxy. They became the peacekeepers of thousands of systems. But then, the darkness came. The void collectors, they fed on fear and silence. They destroyed worlds, erased memories, and broke the connections between life to protect the galaxy. The ancients hid the remaining crystals. Each one was locked away and forgotten, until someone worthy would find them again. Jake stared at the glowing light. "Why me?" he whispered. "I'm just a soldier." "You were hungry," said another voice, "and you gave your only meal to a stranger. You chose compassion when you had nothing left." The crystal glowed once more. And suddenly, Jake saw flashes in his mind. A human in ancient armor standing beside alien warriors. A ship burning in space as children cried out for help. Hands reaching across species, across stars, across time, and always. One figure standing in the middle, it looked just like him. He gasped, the images fading slowly. "I've seen this before," he said. "In my dreams since I was a child." The robed figures all nodded. It was never just a dream. One of them said it was memory. "You carry the spirit of the first warden," another added. "A human protector from the ancient order." Lyra stepped forward now, her form glowing more brightly than before. She was part of this realm, connected in a deeper way. She reached out her hand. "You are not just Jake anymore," she said. "You are the one who brings the bond back." He took her hand, and the ground below him lit up in lines of golden light. The floating crystal pulsed once and shot into his chest. There was no pain, only warmth, clarity, and a sense of purpose stronger than anything he had ever felt. The robed figures began to fade, their voices now soft and distant. "Rise, Warden." They said, "Your time has come again." Jake opened his eyes. He was back on the space station. Lying in a medical pod, machines beeped around him, and Lyra sat beside the bed, watching him with calm eyes. "You were gone for 3 days," she said. "We thought we lost you." Jake sat up slowly, the markings on his arm glowing bright and steady. "I saw them," he said. "The ancients, the memories." Lyra nodded. "Then you know what you are now." Jake stood, stronger than before. The station still buzzed with tension, the threat of the void collectors still hanging in the air. But everything felt different now. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Not just as a soldier, but as a guardian, a protector of something older than war, a bond of peace for the first time in his life. Jake knew why he was born. Not to fight, not to follow orders, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. To carry the light forward, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, and somewhere beyond the stars. The Void Collectors felt the awakening. They knew. The Warden had returned. Jake stood in front of the large hall on Deck 12. All around him, aliens of many shapes and colors had gathered, some tall with crystal skin, others small with leaf-like hair. They whispered in their own languages, but every voice carried the same feeling hope. Lyra stood beside him, dressed in flowing silver robes. Her child, now smiling and healthy, clung gently to Jake's arm. The old bond between them was no longer just sacred, it was real. They were no longer strangers. They were family. Today was the Warden ceremony, not just a title or tradition, but the recognition of a protector returned from the forgotten past. The chamber doors opened slowly, revealing an ancient room filled with symbols carved into the walls. Each mark told a story of guardians, of wars, of peace, and of sacrifice. Jake walked to the center of the hall. Where a glowing pedestal waited, he placed his hand on it, and the markings on his skin lit up instantly. Golden lights spread across the floor like waves in the ocean. The crowd gasped softly, and a quiet hush fell over the room. An elder stepped forward, his eyes filled with wisdom. "You were not born into our world," the elder said, "but your heart belongs to it now." Jake nodded once, his voice steady. "I didn't come here to lead," he said. "I came because I gave my food to a hungry child." The elder smiled, and in that simple act, reminded the stars what it means to be alive. Suddenly, the room's walls shimmered, revealing a giant star map. A signal blinked red near the outer edgy sign of danger. It was the Void Collectors. They were returning, and fast. Everyone turned to Jake, but he didn't flinch. He stepped down from the platform and walked toward the armory, not as a soldier under orders, but as the Warden of Light inside the armory. He opened a sealed case given to him by the council. Inside was a strange armor, ancient and beautiful. It pulsed with soft light and moved slightly, like it was alive. He touched it, and it wrapped around his body with gentle force. Lyra entered the room quietly. "You don't have to face them alone," she said. Jake looked at her with a soft smile. "I know," he replied, "but I will go first, outside the station." The enemy ships had formed a dark circle in space. Their weapons glowed with red fire, and their engines rumbled like thunder. The time for hiding was over. Jake stepped into the hangar, where a small group of defenders waited. Aliens, workers, even children of the council, armed and ready. They all looked at him for direction. "We don't fight because we hate them," Jake said, loud and clear. "We fight because we protect what they cannot understand: hope, kindness, unity." The hangar lights turned green. The outer gate opened, and the stars appeared once more. Jake flew first, leading the way in a small ship powered by both human tech and ancient energy. The armor on his body connected to the ship controls with thought alone. Behind him, the defenders followed, in space. The Void Collectors tried to speak, to demand the crystals return, but Jake sent only one message back. "The bond is alive again." A bright wave of energy burst from Jake's ship. It wasn't a weapon, it was a signal. A call to every world, every forgotten warden, every sleeping power across the galaxy, and from the edges of space, responses came. Ships once buried in time lifted again. Allies who had gone silent returned. The Void Collectors realized they were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The battle was fierce, but united. The defenders held the line. Jake's ship flew through enemy fire, never stopping, never falling. He fought not with hate, but with heart, and when the last of the enemy fled, the stars grew quiet again. The station cheered. Tears and laughter mixing in the corridors. Jake returned to the landing bay. Tired but proud. Lyra and her child ran to him, hugging him tightly. "You came back," the child whispered. "Always," Jake replied. Holding him close, in the weeks that followed, Jake stayed on the station. He trained new guardians, rebuilt damaged systems, and helped plant the first real tree in the garden dome. And every night, he sat with Lyra and her son, sharing food, stories, and silence, not because he had to, but because they were family now. The boy called him Uncle Jake. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, Jake felt something stronger, something deeper. A life he never expected, but one he would protect forever. And far beyond the stars, the galaxy whispered his name. Not as a warrior, but as the one who remembered the old ways, the human who gave up his food and in return gained a new home, a new purpose, and a new family.